This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a very special guest, Chief Justice Roy Moore from the great state of Alabama, my friend, my client, a courageous judge who stood for what he thought was right. In fact, he's the only judge who ever made a ruling, a case that I brought in Alabama. He was then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His fellow justices, as usual, did not agree with him that you would have to present a birth certificate to qualify to run for president. It wasn't just geared with regard to Barack Obama, but all presidential candidates. And that, of course, makes sense. And you can see what the Democrats are trying to do today with legislation, that you have to present your birth certificate, not your birth certificate, but your tax returns, Freudian slip. You know, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander when it comes to the left. But yet this particular Chief Justice made a ruling, Justice Roy Moore, that would have to be done. I had brought cases in Florida as well over Obama's birth certificate. None of the judges there had the courage to even write an opinion before dismissing the case. That tells you about Chief Justice Roy Moore. And another thing about him, he's the one who stood up to have the Ten Commandments in his courtroom. What a bunch of hypocrites. The Supreme Court has the Ten Commandments hanging over its bench, yet he was removed as a lower court judge because he did that. And of course, he was also removed by other judges, hypocrites themselves, because he stood up for the Constitution. Gay marriage is not in the Constitution. It's not even a question of whether it's right or wrong. It's not in the Constitution. And he said state rights have to control the issue. It always has with regard to family law matters. So we're going to hear from Chief Justice Roy Moore because I brought a lawsuit on his behalf. He was unjustly accused of harassing women 40 years ago, young women. It's now been proven to be false. There's litigation ongoing in Alabama in that regard, counter litigation for defamation by these women who were probably paid off by either the Democrat or Republican establishments or others. But I brought a case because Sasha Cohen, who, of course, is that low-class comedian on Showtime, pretended that he was an Israeli Mossad agent. They invited Chief Justice Moore to Washington, D.C. at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel to give him an award in support of Israel. He's a big supporter of Israel. He's a man of faith. And then Sasha Cohen, claiming that he had a device that was invented by the Israeli Defense Forces that would beep when you're with pedophiles, set it off beeping. He defamed our client as a pedophile. So we were in court this week. We're going to talk about all of this with Chief Justice Roy Moore, and we're going to also get into other issues. And I want to talk right now about what's been going on at Fox News, because this is kind of a segue. I talked about it last week, but Chief Justice Moore is no longer on Fox News. Hannity used to be a proponent. Others were a proponent. They ran away from him, just the way they ran away from Sheriff Joseph Arpaio, also my client and friend, and the way they ran away from Cliven Bundy and his family. But now we see open warfare in Fox News. We see that Chris Wallace, who's the anti-Trumper leftist who does Fox News Sunday, has been fighting openly with Laura Ingraham and others on the network because it's coming unglued. It's now clear that Fox is not really a conservative network, but is trying now to serve all purposes, kind of like Newsmax does, which straddles the fence between conservative and liberal. The problem with that is that what you do is you destroy your brand. But more important than that, Fox News is run by a woman, Suzanne Scott, who covered up for the sexual abuse of Roger Ailes. She was working for Roger Ailes. She was his right-hand person, so to speak. I don't want to call her right-hand man, or I'll be vilified for that. Not politically correct. But she can't keep control of what's going on over there. I mean, Roger Ailes was evil, but at least he could control the network hosts. They can't anymore. And now there's open warfare on the network. Before it was just Twitter. They were poking each other. Chris Wallace, Shepard Smith, who are pretty far left. You had Hannity and Ingram and others. They claim that they're the news part of Fox News, Chris Wallace and Shepard Smith, and they're knocking the opinion part of Fox News, which is Hannity and Laura Ingraham. You know, I kind of like Laura Ingraham. I don't like Hannity. I told you about that last week, but I'm not going to get into that. But this is why we need another conservative network. We need a real conservative network to step forward, whether it's Sinclair or whether it's One America News or whether it's others that step up to the plate, because Fox News is collapsing as we speak. And of course, Fox News abandoned Judge Moore. In fact, Hannity set him up in an interview, so he could placate his advertisers and those on the left that actually advertise on his show, because many of those advertisers are left wing. And so you see the fallout of these things. And this is why I have at Freedom Watch a leftist media strike force. We're actually striking back on that. And I'm going to talk about that during the second segment, what we've been doing in that regard. But let's just talk right now about what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. You have a situation where the Attorney General, Bill Barr, put his foot down, told Robert Mueller, no mas, no more. This matter's over. You have the left now attacking him, even though he's released the full Mueller report, claiming that he's a liar. Nancy Pelosi said he lied under oath. He should be prosecuted. Well, of course, it doesn't really matter when leftists lie under oath. You can have James Clapper, former Obama intelligence czar, of the director of national intelligence, or Brett Brennan, who also lied under oath, former CIA director. That's fine. You can do all that. But they're attacking Barr. But here's what I want really to clear up, because, see, this is the false narrative that Fox News is portraying these days, and others are portraying, is that I commend Barr for standing up to Mueller. But when he says that he's going to now do a counter investigation of the deep state under Obama, whether it's Hillary Clinton and the emails, whether it's Barack Obama's own involvement with regard to the FISA court and with regard to the Steele dossier and all these other things, or whether it's James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, the Lovebirds, Bruce Orr. I can go on and on and on. Past is a prologue. Look, I've been doing this for 30 years. What we know is that the establishment covers for each other. The left goes on CNN and MSNBC. The right goes on Fox News currently. They use it to raise money politically for themselves, for their reelection. They use it to boost ratings. They use it for advertising dollars. But you're not going to see an investigation, a real bona fide investigation of what Hillary Clinton did with the emails or anything else. Don't be fooled, because we know that's not going to happen. And just this week, of course, we had Senator Lindsey Graham, who is now the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He had been boasting that he was going to do an investigation of the FISA court. Well, what did he do this week? Just came out the other day. He's now asking Chief Justice John Roberts to investigate this. Now, that's the last person you would want to investigate anything. Pure establishment, someone who himself has been in the closet for years. He's got some skeletons. That's the rumor in Washington, D.C. That's how he got blackmailed, I believe, into flipping on Obamacare. And in today's day and age, being gay is not something you can even defame someone for. You'll get an award for being gay. But he's from that generation that he doesn't want that out. That's been known in Washington, D.C. for a very long time. And they have stuff on everybody. Lindsey Graham, okay, he's closet too. People know that. Again, that's not anything that one needs to be concerned about if you're the new generation, but the old generation doesn't want that out. And therefore, if it's not that dirt, they have other dirt on everybody. Thanks to the NSA, thanks to the deep state, thanks to everything else. And this is why nothing happens. And this is why you need a Freedom Watch. It's what I used to do at Judicial Watch. Freedom Watch does what Judicial Watch used to do. It's not enough just to get documents. The media loves documents, okay? Fitton gets documents, he goes on TV, and then he begs the government to look into things. Just this week, Mark Meadows sent a criminal referral with regard to Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr. And we've gone through that with Peter Paul in prior shows. Now, do you honestly think that the Justice Department, which circles the wagons for its own, it always has, is going to prosecute the wife of someone who's a high official like Bruce Orr? In fact, he's still there. He hasn't been removed. 97% of the Justice Department voted for Hillary Clinton. That's not going to happen. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, support our cause. We have our citizens' grand juries coming up this month. We have our hard-hitting lawsuits. I'm going to talk about that in segment 2. And we are the ones who are actually doing the heavy lifting. We get documents too. Okay, we proved that Mueller was leaking grand jury information. I'm using that in a case that we brought by Jerry Corsi against Robert Mueller, in criminal complaints that we filed against Robert Mueller, in disciplinary complaints that we filed against Robert Mueller. And that is important. But that's why Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman are unique. It's not enough to get documents and then to go on Fox News like Fitton does and says, okay, let's have the government do it. We can't do it. He's not a lawyer, so he asked the government to do it. We're going to be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. In the meantime, I want you to turn to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. We need the help. We need to get bigger. Right now, we're the mouse that roared. We need to be the elephant that roared, a real elephant, not the Republican establishment. And go there and contribute with tax-deductible contributions. If you donate over $250, I'll send you my new book, Essays of a Madman, a 4-volume work. That's Mad Man, not that I'm a madman. And also, I want you to go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org, ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. We're now facing the appeal in his case, and also Corsi Legal Defense Fund, because it's Dr. Corsi who's actually pushing back against Robert Mueller. He's doing more than just getting documents. So I'll be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad,
Special Prosecutor
very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now, I want to again explain the difference between Freedom Watch and Judicial Watch. Freedom Watch does what I used to do at Judicial Watch before I went to run for the U.S. Senate in Florida, where I am today. And we bring the cases. You know, people talk, you listen to Hannity, okay, there's the leftist media, there is no media left. Okay, great. Complain. Give me the same monologue every single night. I'm sick of it. I turn it off. I can't hear it anymore. What we want is action right now. And let's talk about my client, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who has been banned from Fox because it wasn't convenient for them to have him on there after he was found liable for a simple misdemeanor. Well, we had all these publications and networks trashing Sheriff Arpaio, claiming that he was convicted of a felony. Now, why did they do that? Because Arpaio is tied to Trump. Trump supports Arpaio. Arpaio has supported Trump. They're both anti-illegal immigrant. To destroy Trump, you have to get to Arpaio. And if you want to destroy Arpaio, you get to Trump, because any ally of Trump is an enemy of the left. So the New York Times, Chris Cuomo of CNN, the head of CNN, Jeff Zucker, the Huffington Post, and Rolling Stone all defamed Arpaio, claiming he was a felon. We actually filed lawsuits for defamation for hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't get anything out of it at Freedom Watch. If Sheriff wins, he can keep it and give it to a charity. That's what he's likely to do. Maybe we'll start our own network with it, and we can compete with Fox News. But this is something which is egregious, and I just want to point this out because it's Freedom Watch or Larry Klayman in his private capacity has been bringing these lawsuits to actually fight the leftist media. It's called the Leftist Media Strike Force. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. And this week we filed briefs on behalf of Sheriff Arpaio with all of these entities. New York Times went even beyond what Cuomo did on CNN or Huffington Post or Rolling Stone. They trashed him for everything. They accused him of murdering people in his jail. I mean, he didn't do that, obviously. And I mean, they're just simply out of control, and they need to be disciplined, really disciplined. Now, in terms of Chris Cuomo, he went to Yale, believe it or not. He probably got in there through his father, Mario Cuomo, because he's not altogether that bright. But he also went to Fordham Law School. He passed the New York bar. He's a lawyer. He knows the difference between being convicted of a felony and a misdemeanor. And that's why these people are in big trouble. And it's been assigned to a judge in Washington, D.C. who's going to give us a fair shake, Judge Royce Lamberth. I'm not telling you how he's going to rule, nor am I suggesting we've got him in our hip pocket. But it's a whole lot different than having a judge that was appointed by Obama and Clinton. Judge Lamberth was appointed by President Reagan. And he will look at this thing fairly and decide how it should proceed. But this is a perfect example of the difference between Freedom Watch and Judicial Watch. It's a perfect example between the hot air of Sean Hannity and others on the networks who don't make any reference to our lawsuits. Notice it's never discussed on Hannity because years ago I had issues with Hannity. Hannity is not an honest person. He'd go behind my back with the women who I represented, the Clinton women who were harassed, and not tell me. I'd find them on the air, and he'd be asking them questions as if they were in court, and that was compromising my cases at Judicial Watch. That started it with Hannity. But Hannity's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, so he has to give you the same monologue each night. But one thing he doesn't do, and the same guests, Sarah Carter, the rest of them, but he makes no reference to what we're doing. Fox, I've had issues with Ailes in the past, and my case for Laurie Loon will mean I'll probably never be on Fox again. That's fine, because we have our own network. We have Radio America. That's a fine network that doesn't censor, that lets you say it the way it is. And people need to know what it is we're doing at Freedom Watch, which is so special, whether it's our citizens' grand juries, where we're going to indict, try, convict the Clintons, the Obamas, the Comeys, the Rosensteins, the Peter Strzok, the Lisa Pages, the Bruce Orrs, etc. We are starting them in this month in May, for sure, and watch what we have to do. So we really need your support. Go to freedomwatchusa.org, support our cause. We tell it like it is. I just don't make the news, as we say at the beginning of this show. We actually get results, and that's what we're looking for, and we need your help to do it. I'm going to be back with Chief Justice Roy Moore, who, in my view, is the finest judge in this country. He's a man who stands on principle. He's a good man. And I want you to listen to him very carefully about what went on this week with a Reagan-appointed judge in the district court, federal court in Washington, D.C., someone who is not at the level of Judge Roy Moore, but who took the politically correct way out. We need judges on the bench today who have principles, who are not afraid, who will do what needs to be done. Judges are, in theory, our most important public servant, but in reality, they become politicians in robes. I'll be right back with Chief Justice Roy Moore.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with my very good friend, my colleague, my client, Chief Justice Roy Moore, a judge, and as I said at the outset of the show, who has principles, a judge who stands for something, who believes in the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Alabama, and they're not altogether that different, except that the states have rights under the 10th Amendment. And I want to introduce you to him because he was in court this week with me before a Reagan-appointed judge, Thomas F. Hogan, in the case that we brought against Sasha Baron Cohen. I want to welcome you to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, Chief Justice, and I want to give you an opportunity to explain why we brought this suit, why you asked me to bring the suit, and what happened this week in front of Judge Hogan.
Thank you, Larry, and it's nice to be with you. And yes, we did have a good time in Washington, D.C., but of course the court ruled against us on the transfer of venue. I think it was unfair to do so. I think that when somebody is defrauded and intentionally so, as in this case, that I think that the transfer of venue should be where the event occurred, which is in Washington, D.C., and it should be transferred. To do so would allow someone who intends wrong to benefit therefrom. So I think it was wrong to transfer the venue to Southern District of New York. And I see, Larry, that the judiciary has become too politicized, too much ruling on feeling and not enough on law. And as you mentioned, I do stand for the Constitution. I think that that's something our forefathers highly regarded. In fact, one of the quotes I often use from George Washington in his farewell address was that toward the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, speaking about the Constitution, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however spacious the pretext. And that simply means that to have a happy, prosperous government, that we've got to go by the Constitution and the principles laid down in the Declaration of Independence. And I think that we're drifting far from that.
Well, and we also have to go with the law, okay, whether it's out of the Constitution or not. Let me back up a little bit here, because at the outset I explained the genesis of this lawsuit that we brought against Sasha Baron Cohen, Showtime, and CBS. But here's the bottom line here. CBS, by the way, owns Showtime. The bottom line here is that you were defrauded into signing a release of what was going to go on with that show with Sasha Baron Cohen. They knew they were going to defame you. They knew they were going to defame you and claim you were a pedophile with this routine, this disgusting routine that Sasha Baron Cohen did, and you're not, obviously. And I explained how, in your litigation in Alabama, you've disproven the allegations of these women that tried to destroy your first Senate campaign. But by signing this release, there was a clause that said that it would be litigated if there was any litigation that occurred after that show, because they obviously knew something was going to happen in New York City, obviously the bastion of the left. And we maintained that clause was invalid because the entire agreement was based upon fraud. You were fraudulently induced with your fine Christian wife, Kayla, to come to Washington, D.C. to be interviewed. You were fraudulently induced to sign that release. You even modified that release and said there could be no discussion of anything dealing with sex or any allegations of that sort. So you had some understanding that you had to protect yourself, and you did. And they defrauded you again. I mean, there was fraud upon fraud upon fraud upon fraud. And that's what I told this Reagan-appointed judge. It's a good lesson that even Reagan-appointed judges, don't necessarily follow the law or the Constitution. And he took the easy way out, and he said, well, maybe the rest of the contract, the release is valid, but the forum selection clause, there's some authority here, I can transfer it to New York. He didn't have to, because there was a loophole in even a Supreme Court case that was cited that on exceptional circumstances, the forum selection clause would be invalidated with the rest of the contract, which it was. It's an invalid contract because of the fraud. And I pointed out how many frauds. And you sat there and you listened to this judge, and what was really telling, and you kind of knew which way this was going to go within seconds, because I introduced you as Chief Justice Roy Moore, and then he said, well, he's no longer Chief Justice, is he? He was mocking both of us. And that tells you how strong the left-wing media has been, that it defames people, it harms people. Even a Reagan judge can be influenced, and this Reagan judge is establishment. He's not of your level, Judge Moore. And I wrote a column about that. You can find it on our website at freedomwatchusa.org, that you tower above other judges. I explained, how you stood there with regard to having to present a birth certificate if you're running for president, how you stood there with regard to the Ten Commandments, how you stood there with regard to gay marriage. You are somebody that stands on principle. And I got to tell you something, in my 42-year career, I haven't seen a judge at your level who's as principled as you are. So that's why I'm proud to be your friend, and I'm proud to have you as my client, and I will do whatever it takes to get justice for you. But I want to get your thoughts so you can, looking as another judge on that bench, what he was doing. What was your impression of him?
Well, I think it's very unfair, of course. I agree with you, Larry, and thank you for the comments. But it's rather simple. The venue transfer clause is part of the contract. And that contract, if it's entered into by fraud, and clearly there was in this case, as we pointed out, that all these instances that Sasha Baron Cohen had brought up on Who is America were fraudulent based, and they admit that. And if you enter into a contract on fraud, then the entire contract is void ab initio. That means it's void from the beginning. Even the judge said that the venue was proper unless exceptional circumstances exist, and certainly there were exceptional circumstances existent in this case because the entire thing was based on fraud. And he disguised himself. He portrayed that we were coming there for an award from Israel. There was no such circumstance. And it was based solely to embarrass, humiliate another person, to defame a person. You mentioned CBS and Showtime, and I think one of the big things that should be pointed out is that we sent notice to Showtime and CBS before they published this fraud. And when they did, they were on notice that it was defamation, and I think they're liable, therefore, under the law. And you're right, a lot of judges don't go by law today. They go by political influence and just the fact that they don't want to keep a case, they can transfer it, so they don't refer to the law. If you refer to the law, there's certainly exceptional circumstances.
We're still confident of success. In fact, we were saying among ourselves, we may even get a better jury in New York than we would get in Washington, D.C. There you have mostly government workers who are very leftist, et cetera. But we hope that we will get a judge that will let it go to a jury, and we need the support to get it there. We hope that you'll support it. But people run away from other people with principles. I was talking about Fox News at the beginning, how you were interviewed by Hannity, and he ran away from Arpaio, he ran away from Bundy. We need courage in the media today as well, because I believe this judge was also influenced by the leftist media. And, you can't be influenced by that. You have to follow the law. And in fact, it was completely false. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on in Alabama in your cases. And there's been some rumors that you're considering a run for the Senate. And there's some polls that suggest that if you ran again, you would win overwhelmingly, because the people are seeing through this entire fraud, not just Sasha Baron Cohen, but these women that came forward.
Thank you, Larry. Yes, I think that you can see that the judiciary, both at the state and the federal level, have been corrupted. And I say that, that doesn't mean that all judges are corrupt. That doesn't mean that all judges do the wrong thing. That's not true. But we have a good number of liberal people that don't go by the Constitution. And, Article 6 of the Constitution says that this Constitution and the laws of the United States made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And you go up to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they think that they're the supreme law of the land. The supreme law of the land is particularly described as the Constitution and the laws made in pursuance thereof. So we've got to go back to an understanding of the judicial role in our government under separation of powers. And until we do that, we're going to continue to run into things like we run into in Alabama. We have a case filed in Montgomery. As you said, the Covington Burling law firm representing a woman for nothing, and it was purely political. They bring a suit where there is no venue. In other words, neither party was there. The circumstances they allege, which were false, did not occur there. And they tried to make up a case, and even the Alabama Supreme Court refused to remove that, saying, well, venue's proper in either circumstance, but you haven't shown enough reason. Well, if you can't show enough reason when both parties are from the same county, and that's where they allege the incident occurred, it's kind of obvious that the venue should have been transferred, but they did it, I think, because of political reasons. And we've got to get away from following politics and not the law. And yes, I am considering a run, and I will make my decision known by probably midweek in June. I think it's very necessary. I think 2020 is a turning point in our nation. We're going to continue to go downhill, or we're going to turn back to principles. And I think we can see this in the federal government with the president, that there's a big fight to keep him from doing anything that would be principled. Defense of our country at the borders, for example. That's something that's very important. And yet, all we hear about is a Russian investigation. And I'm so sick of that. For 2.5, 3 years of his administration, we've not been able to get to the points that we need to. And that's defense of our country, our economy, and other things. We need to go back and realize that this election is very important, and I think it's very important for principles as well.
Well, that's why you're so important, Judge, is because if we had judges like you, I believe that judges are our most important public servants, but unfortunately what we've gotten for the most part are politicians in robes. And judges are to protect us from the tyranny of the government and the tyranny among ourselves. And we're not doing that. And consequently, your lawsuit, even though you're the named plaintiff, you're bringing that for everybody. You're bringing that for everybody who's been defamed by the left, by people like Sasha Baron Cohen, by networks like Showtime and CBS, far left. And we are fighting back. And that's why we appreciate so much what it is that you have done. Tell us a little bit about, just give us some inkling, what happened with regard to the whole Supreme Court ruling. We've got about a minute and a half left because it's really interesting. That's where the left misreported that you told judges in Alabama that they would have to defy the Supreme Court on the gay rights decision.
Well, basically, they confuse everything they do. I never told judges to defy anybody. I simply pointed out the law that when an injunction is issued by the Alabama Supreme Court, even if it conflicts with a federal court injunction, they're under a duty to obey the injunction that the Alabama Supreme Court, which issued first, held. I said, until the Alabama Supreme Court changes, that you're under that injunction. And, of course, there was a case before the Alabama Supreme Court, and they had asked briefs for the parties to give them about the effect of Obergefell, which is the United States Supreme Court opinion, on their decision. And in the final analysis, they held firm to their injunctions, and yet I was removed for saying that until they ruled, they were under those injunctions. So it was just a hypocritical way of removing me from the bench, and they know it, and I know it, but, people generally don't get informed about these legal technicalities.
Well, that's the difference between Judge Roy Moore and everybody else. Okay, you lay it on the line, Your Honor. And I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to thank you again. In my personal capacity, whatever you decide to do, I support you. And I will do everything I can to make sure that we have more Justice Roy Moores in this country. God bless you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Larry. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now for the verdict. You see, I'm an optimist. People think I'm a pessimist. They think I see the negative side of things because I'm critical. But when you have someone like Chief Justice Roy Moore in this country, that gives you rise to having a feeling of optimism because there are patriots out there. And in the days leading up to our Revolutionary War, to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, it was a handful of founding fathers, whether it was Thomas Jefferson or John Adams or Benjamin Franklin or John Hancock or others. They were the ones that galvanized the colonies to declare a new nation under freedom and liberty and justice for all. And that's why I do what I do. I swim upstream. I'm swimming upstream not just against the leftist media and bringing cases. I'm swimming upstream not just with regard to lawsuits that I file in court. We've had some major victories in the last 4 years. We enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance, giving rise to the USA Freedom Act. We killed Obama's executive amnesty for 5 million illegal aliens. That was through Sheriff Joe Arpaio, my client. The Bundy case, we had the indictment dismissed. We're now up on appeal. We need support for that. They're still at risk. They can still go back and be retried, God forbid, if they're convicted. It's life imprisonment for the Bundys. Go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. And, of course, Jerry Corsi. We stood up against Robert Mueller and his leftist and rabid prosecutorial staff, and we won. Jerry wasn't indicted, and Jerry now is pushing back, the only one who's pushing back against Mueller. He's brought real lawsuits for violation of his constitutional rights, for releasing grand jury information, which is criminal, and also for illegal surveillance. This is something the president should have done. If he had done this early, if he had brought a case with the illegal wiretapping on Trump Tower that ensnarled him, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, his daughter Ivanka, everybody, they would have gone away. They would have run like cowards, because the left, they are a bunch of cowards, and you need to stand up to a bully. If you don't stand up to a bully, the bully will beat you up. In fact, that's what my dad used to tell me when I was in elementary school, as I wrote in my book, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. They would beat me up, the bullies. I was 6 years old when I get off the bus, and my dad told me, you come home beaten up one more time, son, and I'll beat you up when you get here. You know, he wasn't any father of a snowflake. In those days, you didn't go to the principal. You took matters into your own hands, and you developed respect. And that's what I do today at Freedom Watch. That's what we're doing with our citizens' grand juries. We're taking the people's business, the justice system, which no longer belongs to the people, into our own peaceful and legal hands. We will be indicting, trying, convicting, sentencing, meting out the sentences peacefully and legally against the Obamas, against the Clintons, against Comey, against Rosenstein, against Strzok and Page, against Bruce Orr, against John Brennan, against James Clapper, a whole lot of them, because we, the American people, need to rise up. There are not enough people on the bench like Judge Roy Moore. I know of only one similar to that. That's Judge Royce Lambert. The rest of them, forget it. I've been a lawyer for 42 years. Sandra Sauls, yes, Gore v. Bush, he was that way. Judge Sporkin. I can name 4 judges in 42 years that have the guts to really represent the American people. So this is why we are so important at Freedom Watch. And it's why, you know, when I refer to Tom Fitton, who isn't a lawyer, and what Judicial Watch is doing today, and I got much bigger problems, you know, in terms of how they do things than what I'm talking about on this show. But just from the fact of what they claim to do, Freedom of Information Act cases are fine. But when you get documents, what are you going to do with them? The government has all the documents. Congress has all the documents. The judiciary has the documents. The president himself has the documents. What have they done to push back? But when you hear Bill Barr saying, I'm going to investigate, that's just to get the Democrats off his back. They're not going to do it. It'll never happen, because this is the way it works in Washington. The two parties in the end protect each other. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause. Go to tax-deductible contributions. With a contribution of more than $250, I'll send you our 4-volume work. Go to CorsiLegalDefenseFund.com. Contribute to Dr. Corsi's legal defense. With over $150, you'll get a free book that he wrote inside, the Mueller grand jury. And go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org and help him too. Because we need to stand up to the tyranny in our country today, just like our founding fathers did in 1776. We cannot ask the government to do it. Larry Klayman will never get down on his knees and beg anyone to do the job that we, the people, should do. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. And God save America. I'll be back next week.